Story 1.
I nervously adjusted my dress as I approached the entrance of the old school building. It had been years since I had last set foot in this place, and the memories flooded back, both good and bad. Tonight was our school reunion, a chance to reconnect with old friends and reminisce about the past. As I walked through the doors, the familiar sights and sounds greeted me. The laughter of classmates, the music playing softly in the background. It all seemed so normal. But there was an underlying tension in the air, a feeling that something was not quite right. I made my way to the bar, hoping a drink would calm my nerves. As I sipped on my cocktail, I noticed a figure standing alone in the corner. It was Sarah, my best friend from high school. We hadn't spoken in years, but tonight seemed like the perfect opportunity to reconnect. I approached her cautiously, unsure of how she would react. To my surprise, she smiled warmly and embraced me. We spent the next hour catching up on each other's lives, laughing and reminiscing about our shared memories. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, and whispers of unease circulated among the guests. It was as if a dark cloud had settled over the reunion, casting a shadow on what should have been a joyful occasion. As I excused myself to use the restroom, I noticed a flickering light down the hallway. Curiosity got the better of me, and I followed the source of the glow. The light led me to an old classroom, its door slightly ajar. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was dimly lit, and an eerie silence hung in the air. My eyes were drawn to a chalkboard at the front of the room, where a message had been scrawled in red. "Remember what you did." Fear gripped me as I tried to make sense of the message. What could it mean? I racked my brain, searching for any past transgressions that could have prompted such a chilling reminder. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside the classroom. Panic surged through my veins as I desperately tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The room grew colder, and a sense of dread washed over me. Just as I was about to give up hope, I noticed a small window near the ceiling. With a surge of adrenaline, I climbed onto a nearby desk and reached for the latch. It took all my strength, but I managed to pry the window open and squeeze through. I landed on the ground outside, gasping for breath and shaking with fear. As I looked back at the school building, I saw the lights flicker and heard a low, haunting laugh echo through the night. Whatever had trapped me in that room was still inside, waiting for its next victim. I stumbled away from the building, tears streaming down my face. The reunion had turned into a nightmare, and I knew I had narrowly escaped something far worse. The memories of that night would forever haunt me, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most familiar places. From that day forward, I vowed to always trust my instincts and listen to the whispers of unease. The events of that school reunion taught me that sometimes, even in the most ordinary of settings, there can be something truly sinister lurking just out of sight.
Story 2.
I never thought I would go back to my old high school. It had been 10 years since I graduated, and I had no desire to see the place where I had endured so much bullying and humiliation. But when I received an invitation to the reunion, I felt a surge of curiosity. Maybe things had changed. Maybe the people who had tormented me had grown up and become nicer. Maybe I could finally face them and show them how much I had achieved in life. I decided to give it a shot. I booked a flight to London, where I had spent most of my childhood. I packed a nice dress and some accessories, hoping to impress my former classmates. I also brought a small gift for my favorite teacher, Mr. Jones, who had always been kind and supportive of me. He was the only reason I had any fond memories of that school. I arrived at the airport on a Friday evening and took a taxi to the hotel where the reunion was being held. It was a fancy place with a large ballroom and a garden. I checked in and went to my room, feeling nervous and excited. I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled. I had changed a lot since high school. I had lost weight, dyed my hair, and gotten a nose job. I was no longer the awkward, nerdy girl that everyone had made fun of. I was a successful journalist, working for a prestigious magazine. I had traveled the world, met celebrities, and written award-winning stories. I had nothing to be ashamed of. I put on my dress and headed to the ballroom where the reunion was about to start. I walked in and scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces. I saw some of them and felt a pang of recognition. There was Jake, the football star who had dumped me after one date. There was Lisa, the cheerleader who had spread rumors about me. There was Mark, the class clown who had pulled pranks on me. There was Amy, the popular girl who had ignored me. They all looked older, but not much different. They still had the same smug expressions, the same cliques, the same attitudes. I felt a wave of anger and resentment wash over me. How dare they act like nothing had happened? How dare they pretend they were happy and successful when they had made my life a living hell? I wanted to confront them, to make them apologize, to make them suffer. But I knew that would be pointless. They wouldn't care. I decided to ignore them and look for Mr. Jones. He was the only person I wanted to talk to. I walked around the ballroom hoping to spot him. I didn't see him anywhere. I asked one of the staff members, who told me he was in the garden, giving a speech. I thanked him and headed to the garden, feeling relieved. I was glad to get away from the noise and the crowd. I was glad to see someone who would appreciate me. I reached the garden and saw a small stage with a microphone and a projector. There were some chairs and tables, but they were mostly empty. Most of the guests were still in the ballroom, enjoying the music and the drinks. I saw Mr. Jones standing on the stage, holding a remote control. He looked older, but still handsome. He had a friendly smile and a warm voice. He was talking about the school, the memories, the achievements. He was showing some photos on the screen of the students, the teachers, the events. He was telling some jokes, making some compliments, giving some advice. He was the perfect host. I walked towards the stage, feeling happy and nostalgic. I wanted to hug him, to thank him, to tell him how much he had meant to me. I wanted to hear his words of wisdom, his stories of adventure, his jokes of humor. I wanted to be his student again, his friend, his confidant. I reached the front row and raised my hand, hoping to catch his attention. He saw me and smiled. He recognized me. He said my name. He invited me to join him on the stage. He said he had something special for me. But as I got closer, I noticed something strange. The atmosphere in the garden had shifted. The air felt heavy, and a chill ran down my spine. The laughter and chatter from the ballroom seemed distant, almost muted. I looked around, trying to make sense of the eerie silence that had fallen over the garden. Mr. Jones's smile had vanished, replaced by a cold, emotionless expression. His eyes bore into mine, filled with a darkness I had never seen before. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should I approach him? Should I turn and run? But before I could make a decision, Mr. Jones began to speak. "Welcome, my dear students," he said, his voice devoid of warmth or familiarity. "I see you've all come back to relive your memories, but tonight we will not be celebrating the past. Tonight we will confront the truth." Confusion washed over me as I tried to comprehend his words. What truth was he referring to? And why did he sound so menacing? Mr. Jones continued, his voice growing louder and more commanding. "You thought you could escape your past, didn't you? You thought you could come here, dressed up and successful, and pretend that everything was fine. But I remember every cruel word, every malicious act. And tonight, you will face the consequences." Fear gripped me as I realized what he was implying. He knew. He knew about the bullying, the torment, the pain that had haunted me for years. And now he intended to make us pay. As if on cue, the lights in the garden flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. Panic set in as I heard the sound of footsteps approaching, growing louder with each passing second. I stumbled backward, desperately searching for an escape route, but the garden had become a labyrinth of uncertainty. Suddenly, a spotlight illuminated the stage, and Mr. Jones stepped into its glow. He was holding a microphone, his eyes gleaming with a twisted satisfaction. "Tonight," he declared, his voice echoing through the darkness, "you will experience the pain you inflicted upon others. You will understand the consequences of your actions." And then, one by one, the former bullies were dragged onto the stage, their faces etched with terror. And as much as I wanted to revel in their suffering, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. In that moment, I realized that revenge would not heal the wounds of the past. With a surge of courage, I stepped forward. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice filled with conviction. "This isn't the way to find peace. We can't change the past, but we can choose to be better in the future." Mr. Jones turned to me, his eyes narrowing with disdain. "And who are you to lecture me?" he sneered. "I am someone who has experienced the pain of bullying firsthand," I replied, my voice steady. "But I refuse to let it define me. I refuse to perpetuate the cycle of cruelty. We all have the power to change, to grow, to become better than we were. Let's use this reunion as an opportunity for healing, not revenge." There was a moment of silence as my words hung in the air. And then, slowly, the darkness began to lift. The lights in the garden flickered back on, illuminating the faces of my former classmates. They looked shaken, remorseful even. Mr. Jones stepped down from the stage, his expression softened. "You're right," he said quietly. "We can't undo the past, but we can choose a different path moving forward." And so, that night became a turning point for all of us. We spent the rest of the reunion sharing stories, apologizing, and finding common ground. It wasn't easy, and there were still wounds that needed time to heal, but we made a commitment to change. As I left the reunion that night, I felt a sense of closure that I had never thought possible. The ghosts of my high school years no longer haunted me. Instead, I carried with me a newfound hope for the future and a belief in the power of forgiveness and grow.
Story 3.
It was a night I'll never forget. I had just arrived at my high school reunion, eager to catch up with old friends and reminisce about the good old days. As I entered the restaurant, I was greeted by a sea of familiar faces, all smiling and laughing, enjoying the warm atmosphere. The night was going smoothly, with everyone sharing stories and laughter. But as the clock struck midnight, something strange began to happen. I noticed that people were starting to act strangely, whispering to each other and casting suspicious glances around the room. Suddenly, a loud scream pierced the air, and everyone froze in place. I turned to see a group of people huddled together, their faces filled with terror. They were pointing at something behind me, and I slowly turned around to see what had caused the commotion. My heart skipped a beat as I saw a dark figure standing in the corner of the room. It was tall and imposing, its features hidden in the shadows. As it began to move towards us, I felt a chill run down my spine. Panic began to spread through the room as people started to scream and run for the exit. I tried to stay calm, but the fear was overwhelming. I knew I had to get out of there, but the figure was blocking my path. As I tried to find a way around it, I noticed something strange about the figure. It seemed to be moving in slow motion, as if time itself was standing still. I realized that this was my chance to escape. I quickly dodged past the figure and made a dash for the door. I ran as fast as I could, not daring to look back. As I reached the parking lot, I saw a group of people huddled together, their faces filled with fear. I quickly joined them, and we all watched in horror as the figure emerged from the restaurant. We called the police immediately, and they arrived shortly after. As they investigated the scene, we all shared our stories of the terrifying encounter. The police couldn't find any evidence of the figure, and they eventually concluded that it was a prank gone wrong. But as we continued to discuss what had happened, one of our classmates, who happened to be a paranormal investigator, proposed a theory. He explained that the figure we saw was likely a holographic projection created by a group of tech-savvy pranksters. He theorized that these pranksters had set up projectors and speakers throughout the restaurant, creating the illusion of a haunting. The slow-motion effect was achieved through clever manipulation of the projectors, giving the figure an otherworldly appearance. As for the screams and whispers, they were likely pre-recorded audio played through hidden speakers. The sudden change in atmosphere and the crashing sound were all part of the elaborate prank. While we were relieved to have a logical explanation for the events, we couldn't help but admire the ingenuity of the pranksters. It was a well-executed plan that had us all fooled. As the night came to an end, we all agreed that it was an experience we'd never forget. The mystery of the dark figure remains unsolved, but we all survived the night, and that's what matters. We went our separate ways with a newfound appreciation for the power of technology and the importance of skepticism. And to this day, whenever we gather for reunions, we can't help but laugh about that unforgettable night at the haunted restaurant.
Story 4.
I woke up groggily to the sound of my phone ringing.
What?
I fumbled for it on my nightstand, squinting at the bright screen. It was a call from my old classmates, their voices slurred and filled with laughter. "Hey man, where are you? We're all at the reunion," one of them exclaimed. Reunion? I hadn't received any invitation for a reunion. I checked my email and saw that their invitation had ended up in my spam folder. And I hadn't been active on social media lately, so I missed their posts about it too. "Sorry guys," I said, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "I didn't know about the reunion. Is it still going on?" "Yeah, come on over," another voice chimed in. "We're at the Grand Oak restaurant downtown." I hesitated for a moment. It was already late at night, but since I lived in the same city, I figured I could make it there before they all left. Plus, I was curious to catch up with old friends. I arrived at the Grand Oak, its grand entrance illuminated by soft yellow lights. The restaurant was known for its elegant ambiance and delicious food. As I walked in, I was greeted by the sound of laughter and chatter. I scanned the room, searching for familiar faces. It didn't take long to spot them at a large table near the back. They waved me over and I joined them, feeling a mix of nostalgia and excitement. We spent hours reminiscing about our school days, sharing stories and laughter. The atmosphere was lively, the night wore on, and as the clock ticked closer to midnight, I noticed something odd. The restaurant had emptied out except for our table. The staff seemed to have disappeared as well. It felt eerie, like we were in a ghost town. I glanced at my classmates, but they didn't seem to notice. Just as I was about to mention it, a waiter appeared out of nowhere, placing a tray of drinks on our table. He wore a smile that seemed forced, his eyes devoid of any warmth. "Enjoy," he said curtly before vanishing into thin air. I exchanged puzzled glances with my classmates. Something was definitely not right. The strange events continued, making the atmosphere increasingly uncomfortable. The waiter appeared and disappeared like a phantom. I glanced around, realizing that none of my classmates seemed to notice the peculiar occurrences. Feeling a chill down my spine, I decided to discreetly text a friend who worked at the local police station. I briefly explained the situation, hoping for advice on what to do. As I awaited a response, the waiter returned, his expression even more unsettling. "Enjoying the night?" he asked, his tone sending shivers down my spine. I nodded, trying to mask my unease. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from my police friend. "Stay calm. We'll send someone to check it out discreetly. Don't draw attention." I felt a sense of relief knowing that help was on the way, but I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The waiter continued to linger, and the clock struck midnight, sending a shiver through the room. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a hushed silence fell over the table. The once lit room plunged into darkness, leaving only the glow of our phones. Panic set in among my classmates, and I seized the opportunity to suggest we leave. As we made our way towards the exit, the waiter's voice echoed through the darkness. Thank you for coming. We hope you had a pleasant evening." The door cracked open, revealing the deserted streets outside. A patrol car pulled up, its lights flashing discreetly. The police officers inside assured us that they had checked the entire restaurant and found nothing unusual. Confused but grateful for the police presence, we left the Grand Oak behind. The city streets felt normal again, and my classmates dispersed to their homes. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that what we experienced was a bizarre combination of coincidences